All right, and we are back today to talk a little bit of college football. It doesn't seem like there's much going on in terms of the recruiting world, but I got some great speculations. And today I am joined by Drew with the Under Official Review podcast and Anything OU.
And the Anything OU. So double dipping nowadays. So
Double
we're
dipping.
good. We actually have our Chris Plank softball preview coming out. Softball game is tonight over on Flow Sports against Duke. So they're kicking off their season tonight. But certainly if you guys watch that video or watch the game tonight and then want to go back and learn more about those girls and everything like that, Plank gives you a good rundown. We talk about the season, the preview, all that stuff and all that. So that video is actually about to hit here in a few minutes over on our YouTube channel, so go check that out. But then I also do the Under Official Review podcast with my buddy Zach Merrill. We talk all things college football, not just OU related, but yeah, we dive into the whole spectrum of college football and also NFL content too. So go check that out as well.
Yeah, except Drew England won't admit that Patrick Mahomes is the best, and
I mean he's the best quarterback in the league right now, sure.
Hey, Patrick Mahomes will be an all-time great. Actually, Jay and I were talking about this the other day, and he brought up some very good points about you guys had Randy Moss in a time when Randy Moss was setting records. Y'all did have Percy Harvin for a couple of years. Julian Edelman wasn't no scrub. Gronk still might be the best tight end ever to play this game.
But you said Travis Kelce was. So
I did. I said Travis Kelce was, but I'm telling you what Jay told me the other day.
I know, but Tom Brady did not have as much talent as that. So yeah,
I don't know. I guess we'll have to see and compare when the
we'll compare when Patrick Mahomes falls short. Certainly, yeah, definitely.
Well, listen, if the NFL script is 100% true, then the Eagles will be winning this game.
Hey, put your money at 37-34 Eagles. So and see if it's right.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see. Funny. I'll be breaking down every analytic.
So I got the screenshot from the quarters, and after the first quarter, I'm going to be like, oh, all right, and then you go to halftime, you're like, okay. So
the NFL rig will be trending on Twitter a ton. You want to get your channel to grow. That's
a hot topic. That in Colorado is your two nuggets of football. So
yeah, well, hey, I want to go ahead and get started today talking about the Texas Longhorns, which I know, talking about the burnt orange as an OU fan, it kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth. But I want to talk about specifically Steve Sarkisian potentially being on the hot seat in 2023. And here's my reasoning for this, because I put a lot of thought into this, because Texas fans are I've met some that are realistic and then some that just have unrealistic expectations. They're like cowgirl fans. They think they should go to the national championship every single year, but it's their year. Yeah. When you look at what the Longhorns have returning in 2023, 10 out of 11 offensive starters returning. Then you have on the recruiting trail, SARK has went out there and attacked the two, I think, biggest positions of need for the Longhorns over the past, I'd say 10, 12 years, which is the offensive line and the edge, right? You've seen them go out there and land numerous five-star talents on the offensive line. You've seen them flip Colton Vasek from Oklahoma to Texas, which was huge, and Tahu Siliakana. Now, not that I think those guys will start year one, because I didn't think they'd start year one in Oklahoma either, but in terms of the future for like the next 3 years or potential 3 years with those guys, Texas has got some talent there.
Young impact players, man, potentially.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and so in year one, right, if you're Texas, you go 5-7 with SARK. Mm-hmm. That's least desirable. You go on a 6-game skid. You lose to Kansas. Ideally, it looked like the team had quit on SARK, but you saw plenty of portal guys. You saw Texas kind of push a lot of guys out that maybe weren't there for the program, weren't there for the culture, and they come back in year two and go 8-5, and they beat OU for what seems like the first time in forever. What was it, like 4 or 5 straight wins over Texas? Because we had the Big 12 championship game too. I mean, it was. For the past 4 years, Texas should have beaten OU outside of this game, because you had multiple times where you had a lead and Oklahoma had to make historical comebacks to come back and win that game.
I wouldn't say historical comebacks. I think the game's always close. It's always been close. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think they should have won every game or they've had a chance to, but I wouldn't say that they were better than us.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched Kyler Murray have to go back and do 21 points
Yeah, that was the that was
and just lose
good
to a
old
field goal.
Speed D.
When you see Spencer Rattler have to come back in after
Yeah,
being
4
benched in the
overtimes.
first
Yeah.
half and come back in that game, and then you see Caleb Williams do something similar the next
Well, I
year.
think Jalen Hurts. He won that one pretty good, pretty easy. So
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. I think in year 3 though, I think this is the big. I think this is the big year
yep.
because if you're Sark, even though I would say Texas, when you look at their schedule for year 3, it's not, you know, like Oklahoma's where I think it's just pretty much almost a dang cakewalk because they still
Mm-hmm.
have to play at Baylor, at Alabama. I don't think Houston's going to be an easy place to play with
No,
Dana Holgerson there,
no.
but and then they got to go to at TCU and play Kansas State at home. It's not an easy schedule, but I will say this: I think Texas has to win 10 games this year. And I think that not only 10 games, I think you have to at least get to the Big 12 championship. If you don't get to the Big 12 championship, I think there's going to be a lot of questions around, is Sark the right guy? Which I don't think Texas fans should be asking that because so far from what I'm seeing Sark do with the team when it comes to the recruiting trail, I really like where this Texas team is going.
Sure.
It just takes time because this Texas team has had a bad culture for a long time.
Absolutely.
And so I think if you're Texas, the goal is 10 wins and go to a Big 12 championship game. You don't necessarily have to win it, but you need to go.
Yeah.
Now, if you win the Big 12 championship game and you go to a New Year's Six Bowl, I don't know if you could ask for anything else as a Texas fan. So what's your thoughts here, Drew, about Sark potentially being on the hot seat in 2023?
I think that's definitely a question that you're going to have to ask, and I think it's how soon are you going to ask it. I think is going to be the question because as you were talking about the schedule, I got it pulled up here, so I'll just go through a little quick, like off the dome, what I think that Texas could potentially win. So you open up with Rice, that's a win. At Alabama, I'm going to go ahead and say that's a loss. Wyoming, win. At Baylor, I'll give you Baylor. I'll give you Kansas. As an Oklahoma fan, I'm not going to give you that one. So we're going to redeem ourselves this year. But at Houston, I'll give you that one. So that's 5 wins right there. BYU, that's kind of a toss-up game because you don't know how BYU is. But for purposes, I'll give you BYU. So that's 6. Kansas State, Will Howard, I think that they could potentially make it to the Big 12 championship because you never know, that hard-nosed, gritty. But again, you get that game at home. So toss-up, I'll give you that one. At Iowa State, now that one could potentially be, so right there you have 7 wins. Right? So you got Rice win, Wyoming win, Baylor win, Kansas win, Houston win, BYU. I'm going to go back a win. I'll give you that 6. I'm going to say K-State is a loss. At TCU, I'll give you a win. Iowa State, win. So that's 8. Texas Tech, that's a toss-up because Joey McGuire and what they're doing out there. I'm going to say that's a win. So you got 9 wins right there. And a potential for a Big 12 championship appearance. I think you can get to 9 wins if you're Texas on this schedule, just by looking at it. Without, obviously, we can talk more about it when spring football and everything wraps up, and then you kind of see what more rosters and depth charts and quarterbacks and all this other stuff look like. But if I just look at it and run down real quick, I can see 8-9 wins, not easily, but it's a doable schedule for Texas. And I think I'm with you when you say for Sarkisian to really have a step up and some progress. I think he's got to win 9 or 10 games, and I also think that he's got to make a Big 12 championship appearance. I don't think he has to win it necessarily, but I think that he's got to at least, get his foot in the door as far as competing for championships. Because if this is your coach going into the SEC, that's what you need. You need to dominate where you're at right now. So I see 8-9 wins for Texas. Some people may laugh, Oklahoma fans, but looking at their schedule, I don't see, with the talent that they have, and you went over it, I don't see why they couldn't get to 8 or 9 wins this year, and maybe even 10 with a I just threw some toss-in games in there, so they could very easily beat Kansas State, and they could beat us. You never know. It's that game's always what it is. So I could see them at least getting to 8, fairly, with the talent they have, fairly easily.
Yeah, I guess the question that you really have to start asking yourself is, when are Texas fans going to become uncomfortable and start asking for Arch Manning? Because I think the moment that they start asking for Arch Manning, that's when Sark, I think, really starts to hit the hot seat mode.
Well,
because
and there's a lot
you're going to have the fans after you. You're going to have the boosters after you. It's going to not be great for Sark.
It's almost going to be inevitable, especially, and that's another variable. That's something that 8 or 9 wins could be, tough if you see Quinn Ewers struggle early in the year. Obviously Alabama is going to be a really big telltale. Second week of the season at Tuscaloosa, you're going to know what kind of team you've got after that game. You're going to know the improvements, the things you're going to have to work on, obviously some other stuff, and what kind of quarterback you're going to have. So I think and I know Bama is not a very good measuring stick because they're Alabama, but you're going to know pretty quick if Quinn Ewers is your guy after that game. Because you're going to have to win big games like that down the stretch with a quarterback like that for him to still be in the saddle as your number one. So
yeah, and I think the Texas-Alabama game is going to be a pretty good indication of how far off Texas is from the rest of the SEC.
No doubt.
Because last year, I think, was an anomaly with that Alabama team. Will Anderson didn't play well. My God, it was like 115 degrees on that field. I don't think that Alabama
had
ready
17 penalties.
Yeah,
very uncharacteristic.
That was the most undisciplined Nick Saban team we've seen in years in terms of just what you saw all year long from that team. So I look at it and go, I know this Alabama team is going to be leaps and bounds better. You've got to go play in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
That's the key there. If they stay close in that game, I'm going to look at that game and go, all right, so Texas is right there.
Well, because then after that game, you're not going to have any, besides Oklahoma, I don't think as tough of a game down the rest of your schedule.
Yeah, and though Jimmy said it right here, anything less than 9 wins is unacceptable for Texas. Yep. Jimmy, I agree with you. My thing is, I think they have to win 10 games. I think it's 10 because it's not that their schedule is hard. It's also not easy. It's like right there in the middle. I think your toughest games are Baylor, Kansas State. I'm still unsure about what TCU is going to be this year. I'm not super high that they're going to just be.
And I think right now this is way too early. We're just spitballing. You
don't know.
We don't know.
I mean, obviously, here's my thing.
Yeah.
I expect Texas to be one of the top teams, regardless of what they look like in spring ball. Yep. Because if you're going to go out there and you're going to land top 3 classes year in and year out, then guess what? You don't get to wait till spring ball for us to be like, oh, well, Texas should do this. No, your expectations get set almost immediately.
Well, and I think
that's what's happening right now.
Matt, that's a great question. How many guys are sold on their quarterback? Obviously, you don't know what you got with Arch Manning because he's the young guy, but how many guys, when Quinn Ewers starts struggling, they're not going to come out and throw him under the bus, but any means, but they're, you can tell by their attitude who they're behind and everything like that. So that'll be very interesting. Like I said earlier, it's all going to depend on his play because he's probably going to start, barring, Arch Manning just coming in there and just freaking winning the job. But he's going to start the beginning of the year and then probably that Alabama game. And then you're going to really see, all right, is Quinn Ewers our guy or do we need to start putting in, and a perfect game to put the youngster in is probably that Wyoming game. So, I mean, you'll learn real quick who your trigger man is back there with his play. So.
Yeah, and again, I don't want Texas fans to fall into the trap that every other fan base falls into with the true freshman quarterback. I mean, Caleb Williams was just generational talent.
Yeah, you're talking about.
I don't think Arch is that, but I do think Arch will be good in the NFL. I think he will, just because that he's more of a pro-style quarterback.
We kind of bag on him a little bit, but he's certainly got the skill set, the intangibles, but you don't really know until you know how it translates to the next level.
It would be interesting actually because I think Texas actually, because of their offensive line, actually can play a pro-style quarterback really well. Like I think Spencer Rattler would have done really well in the Texas offense because they have a good offensive line. Sure. And I think
and that's going to be
Rattler,
the key.
Yeah,
obviously, and then your backfield too as well. You're replacing B. John Robinson and Roshan Johnson. Who's going to emerge there? A lot of people are saying Brooks and a couple other people. That's another variable in this. If you can get your run game going and take the pressure off of your quarterback, makes it so much easier. Life for a quarterback is so much easier, especially when you can gash teams with the run and you can set up play action and easy throws for your quarterback to sit back there and just get it out to your playmakers. So that's going to be a huge factor, is that O-line and the running backs as well, because you got playmakers on the outside too, but yeah, the run game is going to be huge for Texas, especially early in the season. If they can establish the run, it's going to create balance for your offense, and you're always wanting that as a player and a coach.
Well, and the run game for Texas is interesting because you lose Bijan, you lose Roshan. Those are your two leading rushers. And then outside of that, you take a pretty big dip from 554 yards to 197 in
a lot of production leaving that room.
Yeah. However, though, they do have Cedric Baxter coming in.
Yep,
and I think Cedric Baxter is a guy that could realistically, as a running back, depending on if he really puts on the weight, I mean, he's already at 215, so he probably only needs to put on about another 10 pounds of muscle, which is easily doable in an off season, which I believe he's already enrolled. Yeah, he is. He's already enrolled. So this could be a guy that could be the number one starter for Texas. And he was the number one running back in the country.
Jimmy, that's what we're talking about right now, is who's going to solidify that role. And it could be a committee. I mean, Texas has done that before with some 1-2 punches and stuff like that. Doesn't necessarily have to be one guy, but it could be a balance back there. And, they've got a lot of young talent, certainly. But you're asking them to fill some really big shoes, no doubt.
Yeah, I think the real question is too, who's Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning potentially going to be throwing to? We've heard a lot of rumors that maybe Xavier Worthy after the spring could be hitting the portal. I know there's been a lot of stuff floating around about him. It's a believe it when you see it type of thing. But, they got Adonai Mitchell from Georgia, and Adonai Mitchell was a guy that Texas fans are really high on.
Yep,
6'4", 200-pound guy.
Kid.
And so that could be a great talent on the outside for Quinn Ewers to be throwing to.
Yeah, and then you also got, DeAndre
Moore Jr.
DeAndre Moore Jr., and then you've also got Jonte Cook. Yeah, so you've got some young talent coming in there. I'm not saying the cupboard's going to be bare, but these guys are with no experience yet, but certainly a lot of talent coming in there. And how quick can they pick it up and gel? Certainly could be doing that, but also obviously that spring transfer portal is going to be huge across the country, not just at Texas, but you're going to see some guys moving and a lot of pieces being added and subtracted all over the country.
Matt, to be honest with you, I did not go look at the Washington game, so I'm not sure if they could run the ball. I can pull that up real quick. Usually the bowl games are the time for you to be able to find out what you have for the next year, especially when your guys opt out. Even though that game was very winnable. Robinson was their leading rusher with 27 yards. Yep. So,
and then there's other games where he like TCU, I think held him to like 30 something yards in that game as well. So, it's just
the offensive line for Texas is going to be leaps and bounds better next year. And that's saying a lot because their offensive line was pretty damn good last year.
Well, so it's a lot like
I'm not really worried about their running game struggling too much next year.
Yeah, it's a lot like OU, but at least we saw a little bit of what we're going to get next year with the likes of Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk. Same way, you're going to have young guys really stepping up and getting a lot of carries and asking a lot out of them and I think they'll be okay, but certainly I'm not going to say that they're gonna be just like Roshan and Bijan, because that's two guys that had a lot of experience and got a lot of reps back there. So, but it's just a matter of how quick can they come up to speed and how quick can they jump in there and take off and make plays. So,
yeah, I think that's the key, and I think it's something that we'll all potentially be watching. But kind of moving on here, I want to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. And we talked about this yesterday in Ty's stream, and I kind of want to continue this conversation because I think it's an interesting topic. So somebody the other day asked if the Georgia Bulldogs can three-peat. And honestly, in my opinion, I think it's a no, just because it's so hard to three-peat in any sport, because after a while, after you play so many games, injuries become something that you have to keep your eye on, and they just become prevalent. And ultimately, even though Georgia's deep up and down their roster, It's hard
It
because they're
is.
going to have to go through an SEC schedule, regardless how you look at it. They're going to have to play
Yep.
at Tennessee this year, which I think if you point at any game and say that's the game they lose, it's going to be at Tennessee, which
Yep.
I want to imagine what Tennessee fans are going to be like if they knock off Alabama
Oh
one
gosh.
year and then Georgia the next year.
Yeah,
You've
watch
got
out for
South
that mustard.
Carolina, who that's an incredible watching what's going on there. And then they've got to play a Florida team who knows what they're going to be, but that's
Yep.
a neutral site game. It's not even a home game for Florida or Georgia. So
Nope.
I look at what they're doing on the recruiting trail.
Yep.
Right now, they hold the number one class at a composite score of 226.8. They just recently got the commitment from the number one cornerback in the country. Now, anybody that watches my show all the time, you know that I am still in favor of Ellis Robinson going to Colorado. With Dion taking the number one cornerback in the country 2 years in a row, there's no reason for me to think that he can't do it 3. Especially with Travis Hunter potentially getting up there. So I think when Travis Hunter hits a junior, I'd believe he would hit the NFL draft and leave at that point. I look at the guys that are available for Georgia to take in terms of the players for the 2024 rankings, and I'm not confident that they're going to go out there and just clean up like everybody thinks they will.
No.
You got Dylan Raiola, the number one overall player, the number one quarterback in this class. He's got family at Nebraska. Nebraska's definitely going to be up there. He's taking a visit out to USC, and Lincoln Riley will always recruit quarterbacks really well. You have KJ Bolden, the number 2 overall player and the number 1 safety in the country. KJ Bolden, I'm not really putting a whole lot of stock into his 10 visits that he took to Georgia this year because
he's got a heavy lean to Clemson right now.
Yeah, You're hearing about this relationship with him and Sammy Brown that they have with Dabo Sweeney. He's only 46 miles away from Athens. So, of course, he's going to have been there 10 times. Mike Matthews out of Lilburn, Georgia, another guy that has a strong, tight relationship with Dabo. I don't think they land him. Like, I look up and down the board at these guys that, are being crystal balled and feature casted to end up at Georgia because they're a top player in their position and they're a 5-star, and I just don't see Georgia potentially landing them. And I've talked about it multiple times. I don't think you're going to see an Alabama and a Georgia in the top 5 rankings here in 2024. You're only probably going to see one of them, but definitely not both. I think Clemson, Oklahoma, Florida, and teams like that are going to clean up this year, especially with the playoffs expanding in 2024. I think players are going to see opportunities to start at other schools and make an impact there because they could still go play for a national championship in 2024 and 2025 with the expanded playoffs. So what's your thoughts around here around what Georgia's doing? Do you think they can three-peat, and, do you think they're going to clean up in terms of the recruiting trail? I think you're muted.
When I look at Georgia and the run that they've been on, it's been incredible. It's been something that has been fun to watch. I think that they have a very good chance of repeating their regular season schedule because of just the matchups and the easy schedule that they have. I'm going to be honest and say it's pretty easy by Georgia standards. They're missing a lot of good teams. Obviously, Tennessee is probably going to be a tough game. At Auburn could be potentially a game there. Something like that. South Carolina early in the year could be a good one. That's always a good little rivalry game between those two. So here and there, I mean, there's some could be some trip up games, but Georgia's also, got some question marks as far as starting quarterback, playmakers on the outside, but they still returning Brock Bowers, everything like that. Defensively, you're going to replace some guys, but the schedule sets up pretty favorable for them. But when you're talking about three-peats, there's a reason that no school has ever done it. I think the last opportunity was 03, 04 USC, and then they were going for their 3rd straight against Texas in that Rose Bowl. And Vince Young spoiled the party for them. And look at the kind of roster and everything that they had. You go back to the 70s with Oklahoma, 74, 75. Some Miami teams that had a chance to three-peat as well. It's hard to do in college football, and that's why you don't see very many teams do it. But they certainly have the capability. but with a lot of question marks. I think that they'll lose one or two games in the regular season, at least one, I think, and then potentially, how good is Bama going to be, or a team over there in the West, LSU, something like that. Whoever meets up with them in the SEC championship. I personally don't think they're going to win the SEC. I think they're going to lose in the SEC championship game to whoever that is, and I think Bama is all but tired of hearing about Georgia and their run and their reign, and they're ready to snatch the rug out from underneath them and say, okay, you're done after two. But I could be wrong, and that's why Georgia's done what they've done. Kirby Smart has put together a great staff and a great recruiting class as well. And when you talk about the 24 class, I think you're starting to see more parity as far as recruiting, especially in the 24 class, 25 class moving forward. With the likes of Deion Sanders and those crew that they have out there at Colorado. Obviously, Oklahoma's got a pretty good class that they're trying to put together. Texas out there as well. Clemson is in on a lot of big defensive talent. And so I don't think that they can just run away with the number one recruiting class in 24. I think there's going to be other people that's going to have a little bit of a say in that as far as recruits. So do I think they can repeat or three-peat? Yes and no, but I'm more leaning towards no. And then I don't think they'll end up with the number one recruiting class in 24.
All right, you heard it here first. Listen, and this is not to rag on Bulldog fans, but it's hard. It's hard to do what you do, and it's hard to do what Nick Saban has done for so long that I don't know if they can replicate that kind of success. Just because, like you said, there's so much parity, and with the college football playoffs expanding, I think players are going to see opportunity.
Yeah,
12
teams. That's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to win back-to-back national championships when you even got more teams in the mix and more of a true playoff scenario, like a high school playoffs and how they do at the FCS level and stuff like that. I really love the format. So I'm excited as a coach and everything like that to really see a true playoff situation happen. So that's going to be fun.
Yes, for sure. So you know what? People are talking about OU in the chat, so let's talk about OU in the chat. And let's talk about Jimmy. David Stone, because I know this is one for everybody that everybody's paying attention to.
Yep.
I don't understand why OU fans are so worried here.
I will not say worried, but I will answer this question, Jimmy. Yeah, David Stone is a must for OU. To keep building on what they've been doing, absolutely. Because if he falls, then other really big dominoes will fall our way as well. So to really, like Jackson Arnold and Peyton Bowen were the cornerstones for our 22 class, or 23 class, David Stone is that cornerstone for the 24 class. And you will start seeing guys like Nigel Smith, some other guys like that potentially fall, and we could have a really, really good defensive class for OU moving forward. So PG could speak more onto that because he's more in the recruiting world and talks to a lot of some of the guys over there and hears more than I do. But to get David Stone would be huge, would be an understatement.
Yeah. No, and we're talking. I do talk to a lot of the recruits, and I'm actually about to put together a prediction video for the 2024 class so we can document who I think is going to commit and who won't, so that we can go back and look at that at the end of the 2024 cycle and see just how many I got right. But, ultimately when I look at it, right, I've kind of came down a little bit to it. David Stone, Williams Nwaneri, Nigel Smith. I think all three of those guys are Sooners at the end of it. Williams Nwaneri is, I think, the big piece. We're talking about David Stone a lot, but a lot of people are overlooking Williams Nwaneri and his talent. I think 247 has him as the number 3 overall player in the country. David Stone is number 4. Williams Nwaneri is a guy that, when you're talking about On the edge, you could have PJ Adebore and then Williams, or Williams and PJ. It's gonna be an interesting class to see what they can do on the defensive line. You've got guys like Zena Yumioa Zulu, who is from Allen, Texas. His brother is an offensive tackle at Texas. So I have talked about how if you land Zena, you could potentially get his brother up here. That would be interesting. You've got Jason Ross from Kansas City as well. So I'm curious what they're going to do on the defensive line. As far as the secondary, I think that one's pretty much been talked about a lot. You got Phil Sami, you got Eli Bowen, you got Idris Farouk, you got Aaron Flowers. I don't really think there's any concern for Oklahoma there. On the offensive line, though, I think that's where Oklahoma has to strike big. So you've got Eddie Pierre-Louis, who has actually taken quite a few unofficial visits to Florida, but he's an OU fan at heart, right? That's, this is where he wants to be. This is his dream school, and he's being recruited on the offensive line, even though he's listed as a defensive lineman. And then you've got Grant Bricks, you've got Casey Poe. So those are a couple other guys that I think OU would be favored in if you looked at the race today. And then there's some other ones that OU is obviously involved in recruiting. So it'll just depend on, exactly how many offensive linemen they want to take. But I think if you're Oklahoma, you have to land some big-time offensive linemen in this class, just because you're going to have more enter the draft. You're probably going to have to take a couple out of the portal this year, but you've got to start building.
Well, and then you'll probably have some guys enter the portal as well, because just the day that we're living in, you're going to have T.A. Cunningham's another one to watch out for on the defensive side. Another guy too on the defensive side, a name to watch out for that I would really love to see is a defensive back out of Waco, Texas, and Kobe Black. He's another one that could potentially be on the radar. I know he was going to take a visit to OU for junior day. Didn't end up coming, I think, but is planning on, I think, making some visits up to Norman, stuff like that. But a lot of guys that you're excited about. And that 24 class as a whole is filled with talent. So we could potentially see a really good class on top of the 23 class that we just inked. So definitely excited. Start getting more traction, and obviously pick up steam as the fall comes closer and guys are taking official visits as well. So, but yeah, could be potentially huge.
And you talk about Kobe Black. I think Oklahoma, they're supposedly going to get another visit, so that would put 2 on the board for them, right next up with Baylor. But he's taken 4 unofficials to Texas and A&M, so Texas and then Texas A&M. But he's also taken 5 unofficials to OSU.
Oklahoma State and A&M right now are the 2 that has most interest in, but obviously that could change. So
actually, I think Oklahoma State's probably his number one option if Mike Gundy would actually get out there and recruit, him and some other players. But we ain't here to talk about Mike Gundy.
That's a name to watch out for, is what I was saying. So we could certainly get into that race a little bit more heavy as time.
Mike Gundy's going to blow it. He's going to blow it. He's got a 5-star in the palm of his hands. He's going to blow it. But the recruiting class for Oklahoma, it's, I'll wrap up a couple things on it. You're probably going to take 2 running backs. Caden Durham will probably be the first one. I think the second one will be James People. You'll probably see that close pretty quickly. Zadavian Sims, I didn't mention him earlier, but I think he'll be a Sooner. Michael Hawkins will be a Sooner. I did say Idris Farouk. That is Jalil Farouk's brother. And then you also have Gabe Sacha.
I think it's his cousin.
Yeah, his cousin. Gabe Sawchuk, is that Gavin's brother?
I don't know if they're any related. Is he from Colorado?
Well, I know they're related. I just can't remember if it's a brother or a family member. But he's out in Colorado.
Yeah, I'm sure they're related then if they're both from Colorado.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's when the Oklahoma land, just because the running back room is so deep.
But definitely Eli Bowen, I think, will be a Sooner at the end of the day as well, too.
Shoot, I don't know why he hasn't announced yet.
Yeah. As for Michael Hawkins, I'm either or. I'm not as high on him as other people are, so it is what it is.
Well, I mean, you hear about the staff potentially wanting to take 2 quarterbacks in this class, Michael Hawkins and somebody else, and you got to wonder if that's maybe deterring Michael Hawkins a little bit from wanting to commit to Oklahoma.
Sure.
So I will say, though, if you guys are looking for a dark horse name to keep your eyes out for, in the 2024 class, it's the 5-star edge rusher out of Duncanville, Texas, Colin Simmons. He's picked up 45 offers. Wilt Fong currently has him Fong to end up at LSU, but Duncanville, Texas, that's the stomping grounds of
Oh God.
somebody named Emmett Jones. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys have heard of him or not.
If you guys have not heard of Duncan, I mean, obviously they won the state championship almost every other year, but huge football factory in the state of Texas. Some dudes come out of that school right there in
Yeah.
the Dallas Fort Worth area. Um, it is loaded with talent.
In 2021 and 2022, Colin Simmons put up 34 and a half sacks, 33 tackles for loss, and 147 tackles, 3 forced fumbles. So Colin Simmons is that dude. I think he's when I went and looked, I think he's one of the highest offered guys in terms of 247. Surprisingly, Georgia only just offered him in January, so coming in late to the party. But no, Colin Simmons is somebody that I think if Oklahoma fans are looking for a dark horse, I think Colin Simmons could potentially be your dark horse because of that area that Emmett Jones is from in the Duncanville area. So.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up on the 2023 expectations. I know I did talk to you a little bit about, well, I guess we didn't talk about it. I just texted you about it. Shane Beamer at South Carolina. This has been extremely interesting, what's been going on out there, because it seems like they had a ton of people hit the portal. But they just got a commitment from 5-star athlete Nicholas Harbor, who a lot of people, including myself, really thought, hey, this guy's going to Oregon because Oregon, they produce Olympians at the track level. He wants to do football and track. This is a guy that he's extremely fast. He's going to make a difference on the field. What is Shane Beamer got brewing down there in South Carolina? Because right now in 2024, he holds the number 6 class with a composite score of 112.75. Currently holding the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. What is Shane Beamer doing out there? Because this is, I would have not seen this coming. Yeah. This came out of left field.
He's always been a guy who's been able to recruit. I think we saw the fruits of that when he was the special teams guy and tight ends coach, H-backs coach here at Oklahoma, being able to recruit guys like Braden Willis and Jeremiah Hall, stuff like that. And then obviously going out and being an integral part of some other recruitments. But the dude is born to be a head coach. He grew up with instead of a pacifier, he grew up with a whistle in his mouth. So being around his dad, being around other coaches and stuff like that, I think it's in his blood, and I think he's going to be able to recruit. He's gotten some guys that are able to recruit on his staff as well, and I think that's why you're starting to see that. And he's turning South Carolina back around 7, 8, 9 wins. Really good over there when you're talking about SEC East and trying to compete for SEC championships. And getting to Atlanta, I think, is the goal. And he's done a really good job because it's not easy to recruit, especially where you're at, because you have the likes of Clemson, Georgia, and you're dipping down into Florida. You've obviously got other schools that are right around there that are vying for a lot of different recruits and a lot of different kids. So for him to be able to do what he's doing and potentially finish with a top 10 class would be huge. But I am not surprised because of the guy that he is, and the way that he can recruit and the way that he motivates guys and does a really good job. He's done a really good job so far at South Carolina building that program and setting a good foundation.
Yeah, it's interesting because, he's doing what you honestly need to do when you go to a new program. He's locking down the state, but he's also going into Georgia. He's stealing key players out of there. That was a hotbed recruiting ground for Georgia and Clemson, and he's going in there
when they're 2-time national champions.
Yeah, it's I'm excited to see what Shane Beamer's doing out there in South Carolina, especially with the addition of Nicholas Harbor. You see a player like that commit to a place like South Carolina, and then all of a sudden with recruits, it turns heads and they go, what's going on there? I want to be a part of that. And that's kind of what, somebody was asking about David Stone. That's what you're going to see with David Stone, right? The moment David Stone commits to Oklahoma, you're going to start to see players turn their heads and go, wait, a 5-star defensive lineman just committed there. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they're going to ask questions. They're going to want to take visits, right? And then all of a sudden you're going to have the front runners like what you did with Jackson Arnold and Derek LeBlanc, where you're going to see a David Stone take the lead and really try to go out there and recruit some of these guys. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see what is in store for college football coming up in 2023. But I just saw Jimmy's comment, and I think he just got me, or no, or somebody got me talking about my dog pooping in the background, but I don't think he did that. So, Drew, go ahead and tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, Drew England, one of the hosts of the Under Official Review podcast. We do talk all things college football. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. And then myself and Christian, we do the Anything OU podcast. And we do all OU content there. Got some cool interviews and stuff coming out here. So if you're a Sooner fan, go check that out. We're on all the other platforms as well. Got the Plank video coming out here. Might already be out, but it's a softball preview. And then we have a baseball preview coming up. And then the Sean White video coming out too as well. So if you like all things OU, check out PG's channel. Check out our channel as well. We throw you all good OU content as well. And then for all around college football, go check out our other channel. So always fun to get on here and stir up a little something. So anytime I get to talk with PG, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and you know what? Matt's talking about your favorite player here, Baker Mayfield, and how you love him so much.
Go look at the new sticker just put on my MacBook Pro. I do have Baker's plant flag on there, so I'm not completely hating on him, but I do also have Kyler Murray's our newest addition on the laptop. So.
All right. Hey, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like and the subscribe button. Listen, we got more content coming out this week, more interviews. If you guys haven't already, head over to Twitter. We got a thread right now for the Brandon Harper interview. Drop your questions that you have for Brandon Harper in there, and we're going to ask them on the interview. So,
and we're also doing our Super Bowl preview here coming up on the Under Official Review podcast.
I don't think you need to do one. The NFL already did one for you.
Yeah, but we'll do our own and compare, so go check that one out as well when that comes out.
All right. Hey, thanks for coming in, Drew. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.